Hey everyone, in this video I want to explore PowerShell debugging both with and without VS Code. Now, many times you might think, oh, I don't do debugging, I'm not a developer. But the chances are you've done debugging already. Maybe you were trying to work out, well, what path was my code taking? What was the value of this variable when this happened? Why is it doing this? And we might solve that by adding in write outputs in our code. About to start this function, finish that function, this is the value. Maybe we're really advanced and we do like write verbose, write debug. And I had a whole video just a few weeks ago on actually using write verbose, write debug, try catch, etc. But that in a way is debugging. And sometimes it's the right way to do it. It's a quick way, but there's actually some native debugging we can actually leverage in PowerShell, and it's even easier to use when we use VS Code. So that's what I want to dive into in this video, really looking at how can I see what the code is doing and how can I look and maybe even manipulate the various variables that I'm using in my code. As always, if this is useful, a like, subscribe, comment and share really is appreciated. Make sure you hit that bell icon to be notified when I create new content. Now what I've done is I've written a super simple rock, paper, scissors little application. And we're going to use that to walk through actually, well, what are the various types of debugging things we can do? Now before I get to that, I just want to talk about the setup environment a little bit. So if we jump over for a second, I am running PowerShell 7. So if I jump over to the browser, here I can see, hey, we can go to PowerShell, and I've got these links down below in the description, and I've installed PowerShell 7. For me, it's kind of the Windows x64. I've also installed VS Code. Again, both PowerShell Core and VS Code are cross-platform, so I can use this Windows, Linux, whatever I want. And then within VS Code, what I've actually done is, well, firstly, we can see, if I look at my PS version table down here at the bottom, I can see, okay, well, yep, I am running the version, let's just run that again, 7.13. So I can see I've got that kind of latest version at this time. And also I've added in, I can go to this extensions on the left, and the key one we're dealing with right now is PowerShell. So I've installed this PowerShell extension. The final thing I've really done is if we go to the command palette and go to preferences, the JSON, so you can just start typing in preferences and JSON, we can open the JSON version. And what I've done is I've changed the integrated shell in here to the PowerShell 7 executable. Notice we're double slashing the path, but that's just where the PowerShell 7 is. So that's really the only changes we have actually made to this. So all good on that front. And then what I want to do is actually walk through actually this piece of code. Now, without doing anything else, if I just look at this, very simple, I can see, well, there's a function called write out RPS option, rock, paper, scissors option. I can see there's a start RPS game that has one parameter, just this kind of number of rounds. And then I can see, well, there's this main execution block that calls that start RPS game, telling it 3. So that's it. It's a super simple script. And if I do nothing else, I could just execute that. Now, I could execute that by, in the prompt, just doing dash debug demo and execute. So it's saying 3 rounds of rock, paper. Well, that's kind of weird. Okay, rock, paper, blank, rock, paper, blank. So it's really not working very well, because what I would expect it to say would, well, I think it should say rock, paper, scissors, and then it should output one of rock, paper, or scissors, and it's clearly not doing that. Now I could also execute the script by just kind of within the script anywhere, I can push Control F5. So if I look at the run option, I can run without debugging, so I could select it here, Control plus F5, or I could hit that Control plus F5. But we can see it's really not, oh, this time it actually did something. So there's some weird random behavior that's really not consistent. Now, ordinarily, at this point, I might add in a, well, write output calling this, or write output, this is the value, to try and work out really what's going on. What part of the code is it hitting? What part isn't it? Why isn't it doing it? But instead of that, we're actually going to use the debugging features of PowerShell. So the first thing I want to do is add something called a breakpoint. So as the name really suggests, it's just a point in the code I want it to stop for the debugger, so then I can actually start doing things. So if I look at my code here, well, maybe I'll start really simply. So I've got this execution piece. I don't really care about that. Where it's starting to go wrong, I think, is over here. So I'm going, well, okay, so write output rock, paper, scissors. Well, it's not doing that. It's only doing rock and paper. So what I could do is I could select the line I want it to stop at and then let me debug. Now at this point, I could press the F9 key and you can see it toggles on the breakpoint. I can see that red dot on that left side now. It's the left side of the line number. So I can do F9 to toggle it on, off, on, off. I can also just move my cursor over there and click to turn on or off the toggle. And also on the run command, I can toggle the breakpoint here as well. So I have all these different options to really just turn on this breakpoint. So that's one of the kind of key keystrokes we're going to have, and I'll kind of write these up in a little bit. At this point, I could execute the code. Now this time I want to execute with debugging. So in my run, this time I can just do F5, start debugging. Or again, I could just hit F5. So notice now, it's got to this line, and what it's going to do is going to highlight the line it's about to run. So it's not run this line yet. And I have really these different areas within this debug session. Now I can see I have different variables. So I have kind of automatic variables. It's going to show me, okay, number of rounds, the round I'm on. That's probably going to be useful. I can add particular things that I actually care about. I can add things I want to watch. I can see the call stack, and I can see my breakpoints. I'm going to go into some details about all of these in a little bit. So I can see the line of code I'm actually on in yellow. And I can see I have this debug window down here in the bottom right. So at this point, I can actually interact with the code. Now I can perform different things. Now it's showing me, hey look, I could just continue to the next breakpoint, that's F5. I could step over the code. I can step into the code, step out, start again, restart, or just stop. Stop whatever I'm doing. Now, what's the difference really? What's probably interesting is step over and step into. So how do those things really kind of differ? And the point of this is I could think about, I have some code. So I could think, okay, I have lines of code here. And then maybe it calls a function. So I can think about, okay, I have function 1. Now that function 1 then has its own kind of lines of code. And maybe it calls a function 2. So obviously function 2 has its own lines of code. And then maybe function 1 after it calls that function has some more code. And then the main calling, it has code as well. So if I think about step into and step over, so I could think the step over is kind of that icon. Step into is that icon. When it's not a function, when it's not calling something else, they're going to do the same thing. There's nothing, it can't step into it. So step over and step into are going to do exactly the same thing. Now, when I get to actually calling a function, well, if I do step into, well, now it's actually going to go into the function. if I do step over, well, it's going to jump over that particular call. So step over and step into do the same thing if it's just kind of a regular line of code. If it actually is calling something else, then the step into, so this is kind of step into, will actually go into that function, whereas step over, well, basically, it still executes it behind the scenes, but the debugger doesn't go into it. So I'll just kind of get the result of whatever that was, and that might be exactly what I want to do. And then within that, once again, I could do kind of the step into, I could step into, once again, I could step into, or I could kind of step over, and I could do step over there as well. Again, we'd do the same thing. And once again, if I did step into, well, it's going to go into the function, step over, hey, it just passes to that point. Step out would be, hey, I've stepped into this function, but it's done the thing I care about. I don't want to go through all the rest of the lines in that function. So if I step out, the debugger will now go outside of that function. Again, it still runs the code, but the debugger, I don't have to sit there going line by line through it. It's going to kind of go and jump out for me. So those are some kind of useful keys that we're actually going to use there. So if I think about those for a second, I kind of have F5. So F5 is kind of that run debug. So that's super useful. I can think about why I have F10. So F10, remember, is kind of that step over. I have F11, step into, and then we have the shift F11, step out. So those are some of those kind of key presses we're doing at this time. And if we think about remember what those icons were, step over was kind of that icon, step into was that icon, step out of was that icon. And I guess just to kind of complete the various key combinations we could have, remember I also had kind of the control shift F5, which was restart. And then we also had the shift F5 to stop. So restart is kind of the little icon like that, stop like that. And actually, sorry, that's wrong, that's not right. Sorry. Restart is kind of that icon. And then we have continue. And continue is actually the same key press, but it's once I'm in the debugger, hey, I just do F5, and that was that little kind of play icon. So those are the really key presses we have that I can use, and this is all it's doing. So step into, step over, do the same thing if it's just a line of code, but if it's then calling some function, that's when it does different things. So I wanted to just kind of stress exactly what they were doing. So let's go back to our code for a second. So we're on this line of code, and at this point, step over or step into, remember I've got these little icons here, step over, they're going to do the same thing. So if I do step over, it still runs and checks the different components. It's still doing all of those. Step into, it's doing exactly the same thing. Now notice over here on this auto, it's showing me some variables. So I can see, okay, $_ whatever part I am currently. A number of rounds is 3. The round number I'm on is 1. RPS counter display is 1. And maybe I really care about that, so I could right click it and say add to watch. So it's going to be easier for me to see. Again, that was just a right click, add to watch. If I want to remove it, remove the expression. In the debug window as well, I could do exactly the same thing. I could type RPS counter display, and it will show it to me. I'm running inside that PowerShell at this time. But okay, this is good, so let's just carry on And instead of just clicking this icon continually, notice it wrote out rock. Okay, so that's good. So I'm just going to now keep hitting F10 because I can't bother to keep clicking. So I can see, okay, and then it's going to sleep for half a second. Okay, RPS counter, it's less than 3. But RPS counter is now 2. Okay, good. So now it writes out paper. Perfect, looking good. So RPS counter is now 3. Okay, is it less than 3? Nope. Wait. Okay, so now I kind of know what's happening. I've got less than 3 instead of less than or equal. So at this point, let's fix that. So I can just say, hey, I could either continue and let it just finish, or in this case, I'm just going to stop it. So now I can change this to less than or equal to 3. Oh, equal to 3. And I think that's going to fix it. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to be brave. I'm just going to remove the breakpoint. And I'm just going to hit F5. I'll still run it in the debug. It won't do anything because there's no breakpoints. So if I just run it this time, rock, paper, scissors. So I fixed that problem, but it's still not, didn't show me rock or paper or scissors all that time. All that time. So obviously my code's still fairly sad. Now at this point, I could add a breakpoint on this line, for example. But I can also add breakpoints actually on the function itself. So if this is my function up here, this write out RPS option, I can actually in breakpoints click add and enter the name for that breakpoint. If I now hit F5, so I can see, oh, okay, it stopped on that line, but I don't need it twice. I actually remove that one. If I now do step into, so it's breaking on this function. So now this is kind of what I'm caring about. So RPS choice is some random between, okay, 1 and 9. Okay, good. And there's my RPS choice. So maybe I really care about that value. I could, for example, add it to my watch. And then I can kind of step through and say, okay, 8 was the value. I wouldn't expect it to hit that one. Okay, greater than 7, less than 9, yep. And it wrote out scissors. So, okay, well, that's just looking good. So that's good. Increased the round by 1. Sleep for 2 seconds. And then it's going to go back again. Okay, so it's going to do all these things. Yeah. I could just hit at this point, continue. So it will continue until it hits the function again. Remember, I just hit the little continue button or F5. Okay, so now we're back in our function. Get another random number. This time it's 7. Okay. I can run through it again. Don't expect it to hit any of those. It should hit this though. Greater than 7. Yep. Okay. It didn't output anything. So that's kind of weird. Now again, I could hit continue. It's going to run 3 times, remember, so it comes back to here. Now I can actually manipulate things as well. So if I step into, there's that random. But maybe what I could actually do is, remember, I can look at it down the bottom. So I can say, okay, there's that value 7. I could actually set it. So I might say RPS choice equals 2. I'm actually going to change what it is. And then I can continue. So now it's 2, greater than 1, less than 3, yes. Outputs rock. So it's not just, hey, I can see these things, I can actually change them. Another cool thing I can actually do is I can actually hover over things. If I hover over RPS choice, I can see 2. PS item, 2. PS item, remember PS item is the same as $_. RPS choice. So the nice thing is you can hover over all of these different things to actually get the various values of wherever I am. RPS, counter display, if I was actually in that code right now, all of those things would work. So at this point, what's kind of obvious to me is, oh, I've used greater than and less than. It should be greater than and equals. So I could very easily, okay, so I could do Control-Shift-L to select all of them, change that to greater than equals. And same for this, less than, Control-Shift-L, change them all to less than equals. And then I think I fixed that. Now remember, I've still got that breakpoint in here because that might be useful if I did want to force certain things. But if I now just hit F5, okay, rock, paper, scissors, okay, I could step down. Now maybe at this point it's done this RPS choice random and it's picked 5, but maybe I want to test one of those more extreme circumstances. So I'm going to actually change RPS choice to 4. One of the things that wouldn't have worked before. I want to make sure my code change is actually working. And I could step into it. And it wrote paper. And at this point I might step out. So okay, I'm good with that. That worked. Let it continue. And I've got kind of this breakpoint on the round. Well, it's just stepped out. Now I could hit continue. Just going to repeat again. Once again, I might want to now change a different value. So if I did RPS choice equals, actually 7's a good one. 7 is on the outside already, so I'm not actually going to bother changing that. Step through, make sure it does what I want. Right, scissors, yep, and just hit go. Back here again. Again, remember, step over or step into really does nothing different if it's just a line of code. Choice is 5, so I would expect that to work. And there we go, it wrote paper. Now, the only thing it did do differently, remember, is step over. It didn't sort of go through each individual part of that PS item, greater than and less than 6. So there was a little bit faster option for me. And then I could just hit go. So that was really me very easily troubleshooting. Now I could look at those breakpoints with Get-PSBreakpoint. And you can see when I added it on the function, it's a command, write out RPS option. I could remove that. I could instead, once again, just add it maybe on a certain line. If I just hit F9 there. Now if I do Get-PSBreakpoint, oh, so I'll have to actually go and trigger the debugger. So let's run that again. So you can see now it stopped on that start milliseconds. Now if I do my Get-PSBreakpoint, now it's at a certain line. So it knows about, hey, line 27, because I've now connected to that debugger. Hey, I'm just going to hit go. It's sleeping again, go, go, etc. Now I can actually change them. So maybe, hey, I don't want that there anymore. Maybe I want it just when I'm increasing the round. And maybe I want to restart. So I can actually hit kind of restart and it will just start again. But this time it's going to stop at round. I can see the round number is 1. Once again, I could hover over it and I can see, okay, 1. RPS display count was 4, which is why it popped out, because it wasn't less than or equal to 3. And I could just hit go. Maybe this time I'll actually step into it. So this time I'll step round. Okay, so it's sleeping for 2 seconds. Okay, the round. And again, if I step over, kind of now jumps out of that little for loop. Okay, switch. Looking at each part, stepping over just goes through the logic of those commands. Now sleeps. And run. Just let that kind of finish. And there we go. So that's kind of really basic debugging. But you can see you can step through the lines of code. I can look at the variables. I can even manipulate the various variables. I can edit the breakpoints. One of the other things I could actually do is I don't have to have a breakpoint just on, for example, just a line or just a certain function. So let's get rid of this one. This time, let's put a break here. So I'm hitting F9 to toggle that on. But down here in the breakpoints, I can actually click Edit. So I can actually do an expression. So maybe I only want to break if the RPS choice is greater than 4. So it's actually doing some logic. So now if I run it again, so let's actually restart. So it just wrote rock. Now remember, so it didn't stop because rock, the value must have been 3 or less to output rock. But now my RPS choice is 6. So it did stop because it's meeting my expression of greater than 4, i.e. 6 is greater than 4. So that's why it actually now gave me that place. So if I was trying to test for certain conditions, maybe a variable is a certain value, a certain array, whatever that is, I can write that in the expression to only stop at that certain point. And I can say, hey, go ahead and continue. And it stopped again because the RPS choice was 6 again. Maybe it's not as random as I thought it should be. And we're done. Likewise, I might say, look, I only want to stop after something's run a certain number of times. I'm going to delete the expression. I'm going to add in something called a hit count. So a hit count says, look, only hit the breakpoint when you've hit this breakpoint this number of times. So in my case, I'm setting it to 3. So only when it hits the breakpoint for the 3rd time should it actually go into the debugger. So if I hit F5, so it should complete 2 rounds. Okay. Good. And this time it should stop because this will be the 3rd hit. Okay, so you can see I didn't actually update it properly. So, my bad, I didn't remove the expression. Let's check that again. Okay, now it's only hit count 3. Let's run it again. So this time, so it was that combination, it was 3 and it had to be greater than, which it was not. But this time it should just stop on 3. Okay, there we go. So this time it met that condition. And again, I should be able to go ahead and do my Get-PSBreakpoint. And I can see, hey, I have that bit of logic here to say, hey, on line 4, if this kind of global PS editor, so it's still got an action actually based on that. Now I can see my RPS choice. I'm just going to say, hey, continue. But I can use those kind of hit counts as well as a way to do this. So that was really kind of pretty fast and easy, but there's not a lot to it. And that was kind of the key point. I can just go and add those breakpoints, F5 to execute, and I'm away. And VS Code makes it very nice to kind of see those things. Now, actually something I didn't really drill down into was kind of the stack trace. Now remember, the stack trace is what's called to get to where I am. So I have the main script, and then it called a function, then it called another function. And that would actually show in the stack trace. So if we jump back over to the code for a second, this time, let's actually put a breakpoint somewhere in here. I'll just do it on the RPS choice. So I'm going to add a breakpoint. Hit F5. And here we can see it stopped on that line. And I can see the call stack. So I can see, well, there was the script block that called start RPS game, that called write out RPS option. So I can see exactly how I got to where I am. So it just makes it easy to see what's going on. And again, we have all the different variables. The ones it's automatically showing, local variables, script, global. Again, I could add any of those to the watch that I really care about. But that stack trace might be useful, saying, well, how did I get to where I am right now? What called this function? Maybe I've got the function called in lots of different places. So understanding via that call stack, well, that would help me see, oh, okay, I'm here because, yeah, I was called from this, which got called. It helps me track all the way back up. Now, I've been showing this from VS Code, but it's native to PowerShell as well. So what I'm going to quickly do is just show it in PowerShell, not using kind of the VS Code shortcuts. Now we saw that we can kind of set a breakpoint on anything. So let's exit out of the debugger. And if we scroll up for a second, remember we had kind of the Get-PSBreakpoint. So I've got one there already, and let's just toggle that off for a second. And what I want to do is a set PS breakpoint. And I'm going to say script, it's my debug demo.ps1 file, and I'm going to break on line 17. Why can it not find? Oh, I'm in the wrong folder. Hold on. So let's change folder quickly. CD PowerShell. There we go. So now I can see, okay, there's that break online. If I do my Get-PS breakpoints, and I'm just going to execute the script. So if I just now do an execute on my debug demo.ps1 file, it stopped on line 17. Now because I'm in VS Code, it's still showing me all the nice VS Code things. But I don't have to use that at all. If I actually scroll up, if I type H, I can see help. And notice, I can say, okay, there's step into, step over, step out, continue, quit, detach, view the call stack, list the current source code. So I could type L, and it's going to show me the current lines around where I am, and I can see I'm on round 1. Okay, well now what I could actually do is I could say, well, let's step into. So I could type S, and on the top it's still kind of showing me, so it's kind of makes it a bit easier. If I want to look at the code, remember, I can just hit L again to show the code. Okay, good. And what we'll kind of do is we'll just kind of keep a step over, just to speed this up a little bit. This paper. But I can do all of the same. If I wasn't sure, oh, L. Okay, that's where I am. Right output scissors. And that's going to write RPS option. It wrote rock because I did a step over. So I can see, okay, I actually bounced to this round plus plus. Start sleeping again. But I could see all of those different things. I'm actually going to this time do step into. So I'm just going to keep running again. I could do L if I'm not sure where I am. Okay, that's where I am. Let's step into it. I'm expecting certain outputs. So when I see scissors, I know I'm close. Okay, there's scissors. List my code. Okay, step into. So now I'm in this function, and I could look at my call stack. I could type K, and there's the call stack. Okay, so I'm in the write out RPS option, which was called from start RPS gain, that was called from demo debug. I could again look at the code, exactly where I am. It's showing me the little asterisks, remember, on the current line where I am. And I can do all the same. I could do, for example, continue. Just have it run. And that was it. Again, I can do my Get-PS breakpoints, and they've all kind of gone there. If I actually stop it on VS Code as well, and they're gone. So that was me kind of using it from the debugger itself. So if I think about sort of some of those line options we had, if we go back to our list of kind of the key presses, so remember I can also do the command directly. So the F10 would be kind of the V key, the step over. S would be the step into. O, step out. And then C for continue. And then the other things that are kind of useful, I'm pushing the H, but L shows the code. and K is the call stack. And again, remember H is the help. That's really it. I mean, so that's kind of some of the useful things. Again, you don't have to use those, but I can actually use them together. So even if I was over in VS Code, and let's say, for example, I'm adding in a breakpoint, and I just add in the breakpoint here. So I do F9, and I just do F5, so you can see it's running. I can still mix and match those things. So I'm still in the debugger. I can absolutely just type, for example, well, I could do V for step over, and it's still going to work. I can do S to step into, but I can also press F10, which I'm pressing F10. I could still use these. So they're totally interchangeable. I can use all of those different things. Remember, I can still go and look at the various values for things. So, hey, dollar underscore, I can see it's 1, which is the same as PS item. I can look at my RPS choice, 1. And so this time, okay, it should output rock. And it did. So you have this great way to really interact, this ability to step through the lines of code. So remember, step into, let's just stop this for a second. Let's remove this. So if I F9 here to add a breakpoint on this piece of code, if I just F5 this, so then it stops on that line. And at this point, I have a choice. If I step over, so I click this, then it just carries on. It outputted scissors, but I didn't go into the code. And if I now continue to the next breakpoint, I'm here again. But if I click step into, well, then I go into the function, and I can actually see what it's doing. If I'm like, well, I don't want to be here anymore, I can step out, and I'm back to the code. It ran, it carried on running, it still outputted paper, but I don't actually have to sit and watch all of that. Now, I actually don't even have to run it with debugging. If I stop this, and I'm just going to actually start it, Control F5, so run without debugging. So it's just running. But if within here, I just push, for example, F6, the first opportunity it gets, it will actually now jump in and halt and open up the debugger for me. So even though it was just, so if you ever had a script running, I can actually just push F6. So if we look, it doesn't actually show it here, but it's the same as doing Control B in the PowerShell ISE. So I'm just pushing F6. It may show it somewhere. I don't know if F6 is actually shown as a shortcut. I'm sure it is somewhere. But it will actually then break into, and then I could just say go continue, and it's just now running again. If I was ever writing code and maybe I wanted a debugger to attach to it, I can actually write in wait debugger. And what this will do is if I now just execute this, again, I can just run it without debugging. It's going to stop. Now, because I'm running VS Code, it automatically just attaches to it. So VS Code sees that and says, okay, I'll attach to it. If I wasn't in VS Code, it would wait for some process. Maybe I want to go and connect remotely via a debugger to actually go and connect and then debug that process. So that can be like a super useful option. I can take that out and I'll just hit go. And then it will finish. And I think, did I have a breakpoint there as well? And again, because I took that out, it's still executing, so we'll just go. Go. And we're done. So this breakpoint here. Oh, because I said a breakpoint. Okay. We'll remove that as well. And that's really it. So I just wanted to show kind of those few very simple things. There's really not a huge amount to it. Again, I maybe showed more detail than was even needed, really. The key point is you can add breakpoints. I can go and look at variables. I can watch certain ones. I can see that call stack. And yeah, if I want to go and actually step in, hey, there's a step into, or I can step over. But go and play with it. There's actually sample files in VS Code to help go and look at this. My one, I'll have the link if you want to go and break the code and then fix it again. But that was it. Really a lot easier in a lot of ways than adding lots and lots of write outputs to try and work out what's being called. I can just go and look at it. Hope that was useful. Until next time, take care.